The humid air hung heavy as I pulled into my driveway, the remnants of a grueling day clinging to me like a second skin. As Mark Thompson, a senior analyst at a demanding tech firm, I spent my days navigating complex algorithms and high-pressure deadlines. All I wanted was to wash away the stress and soak in the tranquility of my backyard haven. The pool, a shimmering oasis reflecting the late afternoon sun, beckoned me like a siren's call. I changed into my swim trunks with a sigh of relief, grabbing my favorite inflatable lounger from the garage. Stepping out into the backyard, the scent of chlorine and freshly cut grass filled my nostrils. It was bliss. I eased myself into the cool water, the flow of tide cradling me as I drifted lazily. The world seemed to soften, the anxieties of the day melting away with each gentle ripple. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of the sun kiss my skin. For a brief, precious moment, I was at peace. My reverie was shattered by a sudden commotion. A high-pitched, grating voice sliced through the tranquility. I opened my eyes to see a boy standing at the edge of my pool, his face contorted in a furious scowl. I recognized him immediately, Karen's son, pint-sized tyrant notorious for his entitled behavior and a disturbing tendency toward mimicking his mother's prejudiced remarks. I braced myself, knowing instinctively that this wouldn't be a pleasant encounter. He stomped his foot, the sound echoing across the yard. "Hey, you need to get out of the pool right now," he shrieked, his voice laced with an arrogant demand. I raised an eyebrow, taken aback by his audacity. "Excuse me," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "This is my property, and I'm enjoying my pool." He puffed out his chest, his eyes narrowed in a way that eerily mirrored his mother's signature glare. "Well, I want to have a pool party with my friends, and you're in the way. So get out. Now." The sheer entitlement of his statement was astounding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I chuckled softly, shaking my head in disbelief. "I'm sorry, but that's not going to happen. This is my pool, and I have no intention of leaving." His face flushed crimson, his small frame trembling with indignation. But it's not fair," he stammered, his voice rising in pitch. "I told all my friends we could use your pool. You have to get out." I sighed, trying to maintain my composure. It was infuriating to have my peace disturbed by this bratty child, but I refused to let him provoke me. "I understand you're disappointed," I said, "but this is my property. You can't just demand that I leave so you can have a party." I thought that would be the end of it, but oh, was I wrong. His eyes glazed over as he started to mimic his mom's behavior. He said, "You need to leave now. I don't allow you to use my pool. I am an American, and you need to go back to where you belong." I was at a loss for words and was in complete shock. How could this kid become like this? I thought to myself I need to call his mother, but I realized that he probably got this attitude from her. The boy's face contorted into a mask of pure malice. "You better get out of the pool or else," he threatened, his voice dripping with venom. "Or else what?" I challenged, refusing to be intimidated by a child. He hesitated for a moment and said, "I'll just do what my mom does and call the police. I can tell them anything, and they will believe me and arrest you." The chilling implications of his words hung heavy in the air. This wasn't just childish petulance. It was a dark reflection of the prejudice that had been instilled in him by his mother. It was really sad to see this, and I knew that something had to be done. He stared at me for a moment, as if expecting me to cower in fear. When I didn't budge, he let out a frustrated scream and ran back towards his house, muttering threats under his breath. "You will see. I'll get you out of that pool if it's the last thing I do." I watched him go, my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and apprehension. I knew that this wasn't over. Karen was notorious for her vindictive nature, and she wouldn't let this go easily. I decided to get out of the pool. I was no longer relaxed, and I knew they would be back. As I stepped out of the pool, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I explained the situation to the operator, detailing the boy's behavior and the thinly veiled threat he had made. I didn't want to overreact, but I felt it was important to have a record of the incident, just in case things escalated. The operator assured me that they would dispatch an officer to investigate. I waited anxiously, pacing back and forth by the pool, my eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of Karen or her son. It felt like an eternity before I saw the flashing lights of a police cruiser approaching. 2 officers emerged from the vehicle, their expressions serious. I met them at the edge of my property, recounting the events that had just transpired. They listened attentively, taking notes as I spoke. As I was explaining the situation to the officers, I heard commotion coming from the direction of Karen's house. I turned to see a large group of boys charging towards my yard, led by Karen's son. Their faces were flushed with anger, and they were shouting obscenities and threats. "Get him! He wouldn't let us use his pool." Karen's son screamed, pointing at me. The officers immediately sprang into action, positioning themselves between me and the approaching mob. "Stop right there," one of the officers shouted, his voice commanding. "You are trespassing on private property. Disperse immediately." The boys ignored his orders, continuing to surge forward. One of them threw a rock, which narrowly missed my head. The officers drew their batons and began to push the boys back, using their authority to try and regain control of the situation. The scene was chaotic, with shouting, shoving, and the distinct smell of teenage angst filling the air. I watched in disbelief as my peaceful backyard was transformed into a battleground. The officers managed to push the boys back towards Karen's property line, but they refused to leave entirely. They stood there, hurling insults and threats, their anger simmering just below the surface. One of the officers approached Karen's front door and knocked loudly. After a moment, Karen herself appeared, her face a mask of feigned innocence. "What seems to be the problem, officers?" she asked, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. The officer explained the situation, detailing her son's behavior and the attempted assault on my property. Karen feigned surprise and outrage. "I can't believe my son would do something like that," she exclaimed, her tone utterly unconvincing. "I assure you, officer, I had no idea this was happening. I will speak to him immediately." The officer wasn't buying it. "Ma'am, your son and his friends were clearly intent on causing trouble. This is unacceptable. We are going to issue them a warning, and if they return to this property, they will be arrested for trespassing." Karen's facade began to crack, her eyes narrowing in anger. "Are you accusing my son of wrongdoing?" she demanded, her voice rising in pitch. "He just wanted to have a little fun with his friends. It's not his fault that this man," she sneered, gesturing towards me, "is being so unreasonable." The officer remained calm and professional. "Ma'am, regardless of your opinion, your son's behavior was inappropriate and potentially dangerous. We are here to ensure the safety and security of this neighborhood. Thompson's right to enjoy his own property." He turned to the boys, who were still standing at the edge of the yard, their faces sullen. "You all need to go home right now. If we see you back here again, you will be arrested. Do you understand?" The boys mumbled their assent, their bravado diminished by the presence of law enforcement. Slowly, they began to disperse, casting resentful glances in my direction as they retreated. Karen watched them go, her face a mixture of anger and defeat. With the boys gone, the officers turned their attention back to Karen and me. "Mr. Thompson," one of the officers said, "we recommend that you consider filing a restraining order against Mrs. Karen's last name and her son. Their behavior has been unacceptable, and it's important to protect yourself from any further harassment." I'd already been thinking about it, and I knew that it was the right thing to do. Karen had a history of targeting her neighbors, and I didn't want to become her next victim. "I agree," I said. "I want to file a restraining order against both of them, as well as all of the boys who were involved in the attempted assault." The officers nodded in agreement. "We'll help you with the paperwork," one of them said. "We'll also make sure that Mrs. Karen's last name is served with the order as soon as possible." Karen stood there, her face a mask of fury. "You can't do this," she shrieked. "This is an outrage. You're just taking his side because... She sputtered, unable to articulate her prejudiced thoughts. The officer ignored her outburst. "Mrs. Karen's last name. You need to calm down. If you continue to harass Mr. Thompson, you will be arrested." He said, "Furthermore, ma'am, I see that your son obtained this behavior from you, and you need to educate him and teach him that it is bad to be racist." Karen didn't say anything to this and continued to stand there with the angry look on her face. After a few minutes of preparing paperwork, the police officers then left the scene, leaving me there with Karen and her son. Karen was very upset but knew that she could not do anything. The next few days were a blur of legal proceedings and anxious waiting. With the help of the police, I quickly filed for the restraining order, providing detailed accounts of Karen's and her son's harassment, as well as the attempted assault by the group of boys. The judge granted the order swiftly, recognizing the potential danger I was in. The restraining order prohibited Karen, her son, and all the identified boys from coming within 100 feet of my property, my person, or my vehicle. It also forbade them from contacting me in any way, shape, or form. The relief that washed over me when I received the official document was immense. I felt like I could finally breathe again. I knew that the restraining order wouldn't magically erase the prejudice and hatred that had been directed towards me, but it did provide a crucial layer of protection. It sent a clear message that their behavior was unacceptable and that there would be consequences for their actions. Word of the restraining order spread quickly throughout the neighborhood. Some neighbors expressed their support, while others remained silent, either out of fear of Karen's wrath or because they shared her prejudiced views. I focused on building relationships with the supportive neighbors, creating a sense of community based on respect and understanding. As for Karen, she retreated into her house, her face contorted in a perpetual scowl whenever she caught sight of me. Her son, stripped of his sense of entitlement and the support of his friends, seemed subdued and withdrawn. While I didn't revel in their misfortune, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction knowing that their actions had consequences. I was glad that I was able to put a stop to it, and the first step was to get the restraining order. This ultimately led to Karen and her son moving out of the state and starting over new. I was able to live peacefully and happily without having the thought of racism in my head. I continued to live in the house, and it became a safe haven where I could live comfortably.